Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for extending me this courtesy. Good afternoon. I'd also like to welcome Acting Secretary Ashworth, Generals Saltzman and Alban. It's a distinguished panel that's here, but as the chair pointed out, we look forward to having a conversation with the upcoming Secretary of Air Force about the budget after confirmation. We know that the Senate has been having conversations, but our members too would like to understand the priorities that he's going to be putting forth. This is our first hearing with the administration's release of the skinny budget. I'd like to take a few minutes to acknowledge what the administration is proposing. For defense discretionary spending, President Trump is proposing $893 billion request, essentially what President Biden would have proposed. This is effectively a freeze from the current fiscal year. Any increases beyond that are assumed through the reconciliation process, which the authorizers control. No one will be shocked to learn that I don't think that reconciliation is a responsible way to appropriate defense dollars. The committee is constitutionally responsible for the allocation of DoD resources, and we should be controlling the process. Appropriating defense dollars through reconciliation undermines the authority and the jurisdiction of the Appropriations Committee. Now, the administration of both parties have tried before to move money from the discretionary budget into mandatory spending. This is not a new trick, but this is something normally done without any defense spending involved. And that's because reconciliation bill may not become the law. If it does not, the committee cannot guarantee that the DoD priorities will be backfilled through the appropriations process. Next, we know the programs for clean energy and climate resilience have been cut by the administration. As leaders of the Air Force and Space Force, you cannot afford to take your eyes off the cost of climate change. Islands in the Pacific are not easily places to get shipping materials to or to build and maintain infrastructure in. It's difficult to protect them from the impacts of climate disruption. Just look at the typhoon that hit Guam 2 years ago. $180 billion in additional funding was required to support the construction, planning, and design of facilities on Guam that were destroyed. The continuing resolution last December carried an additional $3.4 billion in repair costs for other catastrophic weather events. That's over $5 billion in taxpayers' money that they had to spend on the impacts of climate change within the Department of Defense. That's not waste, that's not fraud, that's not abuse, or any other kind of political spin. It is necessary to prepare, to protect, and replace critical infrastructure that our war fighters depend upon. Climate disruption will not just go away by a wish and a prayer. It is something we have to plan for, deal with, and expect to happen into the future. Now, turning to major programs, Air Force and Space Force have big bills due right now. Sentinel program, as been mentioned, is ballooning, $141 billion, and that's from an original estimate of $78 billion. The schedule is wildly off track from where it needs to be. Next Generation Air Dominance program is planned to exceed $23 billion, and the price per plane is a serious consideration. Next, Air Force One is behind schedule, and the Air Force has asked for more money to get that back on track. Progress has been made on the parked F-35s, and that's good news, although it was bad news for us to read recently in the paper. The world's top jet fighter is about to get more expensive because of the president's tariffs. But there's more to get those planes, more that needs to be done to get those planes delivered. And the capabilities that the service needs depends on those planes being delivered. And then, of course, there are new requirements, as the chair mentioned now. Golden Dome, a missile defense program that has yet to be fully articulated by the administration. These are problems that must be fixed through proper program management, planning, and resources, as the chairman pointed out. Finally, I want to comment on the administration's approach to personnel management. There is no question that there's a culture of fear developing across the federal government as this administration continues to demean and demoralize federal employees. I have spoken with far too many of them. People have been fired without cause. People have been asked to quit and, quote, find higher productive jobs in the private sector. I wish the Department of Defense had been immune to this, but it's not. I've had conversations with the services and especially Space Force about how do we build a first-class workforce. Secretary Hass's goal is to remove 60 to 70,000 civilians across DOD. Now, civilians are raising their hands not to serve, but they're raising their hands to leave. Who will be around to manage the contracting process if DOD needs to get major programs back on track? We are already living with the impacts of what happens when civilians take a buyout and stop working on contracts. The contract isn't signed. The mission doesn't get done. The programs fall behind, and it costs the taxpayers more. There will be real ramifications to our national security because of the administration's personnel policies. We need to do something, sure, but let's not take a chainsaw to it. Let's take a scalpel to what we need to do with our personnel policies. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you again for appearing here today. I want to thank you for your service, to the service of the airmen, guardians, and civilians serving alongside you. And Mr. Chair, once again, I thank you for the courtesy, and I yield back.